The wood smoke clings to your clothes, and the clatter of a merchant's cart fills your yard as dusk settles on your tavern. It feels like a storybook success, but your open ledger reveals a punishing reality. Your headline product is sold at a price fixed by law, leaving you with zero room to move. You aren't running a bar. You are running a survival machine against regional trade volatility, while the fantasy promises warmth and ale. The reality is a constant battle against physical rot, high fixed costs, and the volatile whims of trade route traffic. You realize this place was never just a bar. It was a precarious nexus of regional logistics. A medieval inn did not sell beer. It sold safe sleep on a dangerous trade road. But if the drink wasn't the primary engine of your livelihood, what was it actually trading in? You are looking at a machine built to absorb the chaos of the road. Your doors remain open to anyone with the coin to pay, but your walls are tasked with far more than sheltering a drinking patron. You are managing a staging post for a logistics network that never pauses for the weather or a failed harvest. This demands maintaining stables that are frequently more occupied than your guest rooms, and guarding grain stores that function as vital, flammable buffers against local scarcity. Your income does not reside in the ale pot. It is pinned to your ability to secure transit cargo, sustain exhausted livestock, and satisfy the relentless demands of your institutional landlord. You are beginning to suspect the romantic image of the merry host hides a ledger straining under heavy physical burdens. We will now tear apart your balance sheet to see exactly where the coin flows and uncover the drain that no amount of customers could fix. The real stress begins at the stable door. You are carrying a massive fixed cost that never sleeps and consumes your capital regardless of how many travelers pass through your gates. This silent drain was the mechanism that dictated whether you turned a profit or slid into ruin. If the drink is not the business, what are you actually trading in? You are a cornerstone of the regional supply chain, an essential node in a precarious network where safety is the true commodity. When a merchant arrives after a week on the road, he does not just want a drink. He needs a secure place to store his wool, a safe stall for his horse, and someone he can trust to keep watch over goods that represent his entire livelihood. You are providing the warehouse, the night guard, and the stabling that the open road cannot offer. In towns, these inns became centers for private trade deals, bypassing the standard town marketplace to dodge local civic tolls. You were effectively offering a legal gray zone, where high-stakes commerce moved away from the prying eyes of town tax collectors. This was not just hospitality. It was the facilitation of logistics, the management of cargo, and the provision of trust in an era where trust was the most expensive thing to buy. Yet, as you stand in that yard watching a merchant unload heavy packs of Cotswold wool, the reality of your balance sheet hits. You have the land, the roof, the stable, and the staff, but your income is not coming from the tap. Every bit of infrastructure you own is being leveraged against the constant, unpredictable flow of trade. You are operating a capital-intensive fixed plant, where every variable is trying to drain your reserves. To keep the doors open, you need to know exactly how much you can afford to sink into this structure before you open for the day. That requires us to look at the raw cost of the physical foundation you are standing on. You are betting your future on a structure that is less a home and more a specialized machine. Before you can sell a crust of bread, you have already poured a fortune into the land, the timber, the brewing vessels, and the massive stocks of fodder needed to keep your guests' animals alive. You have anchored yourself to a fixed plant that requires constant, expensive maintenance just to keep the roof over the stables from collapsing. Then, you encounter the reality that truly stifles your profit. Your headline product is not yours to price. Under the Assize of Bread and Ale, codified around 1266, your ale is subject to strict, state-mandated price caps. This is designed to keep output affordable for the local populace. Every gallon you serve must conform to quality and measure standards monitored with clinical precision. If you skimp on a drop or dilute the brew, you face the ale conners. Men elected annually in the manorial courtleet, sworn to assay your brew and haul you before the court for any deviation. The penalties move quickly from fines to the confiscation of your brewing equipment. You are essentially operating in a state of perpetual audit, where your revenue is frozen by law, but your operating expenses remain exposed to every fluctuation of the harvest and the road. You must now consider what happens to your security when the costs of running such a plant begin to move, while your income is held static by a government official's pen. The most powerful force in your establishment is the landlord's ledger, not your own. Your independence is an illusion, for you rarely own the walls you occupy. Many of the most successful inns were established by institutions, such as the Angel at Andover, which was property of Winchester College. You are a tenant in a machine that never sleeps, never suffers a bad harvest, and never renegotiates a lease. Consider the cost. In the middle of the 15th century, that same inn carried an annual rent of £8. For context, a skilled master carpenter would need to labor for over 380 days to earn that sum. That is over a year of constant work, harvested from your books before you have sold a single meal or stabled one horse. This rent is a rigid, unrelenting claim on your survival that persists even if the trade routes go silent. Beyond this fixed burden, you operate inside a web of secondary costs. You owe tithes to the parish and dues to the manorial court. You act as an informal bank, extending credit to merchants who may be months away from returning, while your capital remains tied up in stored grain. Not merely for brewing, but as a hedge against the price volatility that can swing a season. These obligations compete for every penny. Your model relies on high-volume traffic, yet your cost structure remains stubbornly immovable. You are squeezed from both directions. The legal cap on your ale price prevents you from passing costs to the customer, while your rent remains immune to the realities of a wet autumn. If the ale is price fixed by statute and the rent is absolute, where does the actual profit come from? The answer hides in the ledgers of travelers who did not arrive at your door for the drink. Consider a surviving bill from 1331. 7 people, 3 men and 4 servants, stopped at an inn for the night. Their bill lists bread at 4 pence, beer at 2 pence, and wine for just over a penny. Meat cost 5.5 pence, while candles and pottage each added a farthing. Fuel for the fire was 2 pence, and the bill for their beds was 2 pence. The 7 humans combined paid only 2 pence to sleep under your roof. Look at the bottom of that same ledger. Fodder for their horses cost 10 pence. The animal care alone was 5 times the price of the human lodging, and it accounted for nearly a third of the entire bill. The beer that we romanticize as the tavern's headline product barely touched 7% of the total cost. For perspective, a master mason in this period earned about 4 pence for a full day of skilled labor. This single party's horse feed bill represented 2.5 days of a craftsman's wages. The travelers did not haggle over the price of their own beds, but they were deeply invested in the maintenance of their mounts and the security of their cargo. You were never truly an innkeeper in the sense of a publican. You were a service station on a regional logistics network. The beds were a loss leader, a hook to get the high-value transport assets, the animals and the trade goods, inside your walls for the night. You held their inventory, managed their onward transport, and charged a premium for the peace of mind that their assets would survive until dawn. The inn was a secure container for the movement of regional wealth. The travelers in your yard were not there to socialize. They were there to protect the capital tied up in their pack animals and wool sacks. Because you could not inflate the price of a pint to cover rising costs, you became an expert in monetizing the desperate necessity of others. You charged for the straw that kept a horse warm, for the security that kept a merchant from being robbed in the dark, and for the storage space that moved goods across the kingdom. Yet, this reveals the true trap of your trade. If your entire business model pivoted on the presence of animals and transit goods, you were at the mercy of the road's flow. You were a fixed facility waiting for a mobile market to pass through your gates. The moment that flow shifted, your income vanished while your rent to that institutional landlord remained stubbornly, mercilessly fixed. The ledger is a battlefield, and that 1331 bill is your map of the front lines. Your guests are not your clients. They are the people attached to the high-value cargo in your yard. You are a warehouseman managing livestock, and your profitability depends on the caloric intake of a horse, not the thirst of a traveler. This model creates a hidden, relentless drain. Think of the ale. It is a perishable, volatile product. It cannot sit in a cool, dark corner indefinitely. It sours and goes flat, forcing you to dump barrels into the gutter that you have already paid to brew. You are stuck with this inventory, and because the Assize of bread and ale keeps your headline product price firmly locked, you cannot simply hike your costs to cover the loss of a spoiled batch. You are operating a business where the raw material is prone to rot, and the final sale price is mandated by a law written by someone who has never poured a pint. Then there is the court leet. If the local ale conner arrives, sticks a rod into your vat, and decides the quality is off or the measure is short, you are hit with an amerciement. These are recurring, unpredictable fees that act like a shadow tax on your operation. And while the guest horses provide that 10 pence fodder revenue, your own draft animals, the ones you need to haul timber, fuel, and grain to your door, are pure overhead. They eat daily, they drink daily, and they produce zero revenue. They are a standing cost, a constant pressure on your grain store that persists regardless of how many travelers pass through your yard. Every extra horse is both your lifeline and your heaviest liability. When the harvest fails and grain prices spike, the cost of feeding your own animals jumps, but your ale price stays frozen by royal statute. You are trying to offset a massive, volatile rise in raw material costs with a fixed revenue stream. You aren't just selling a bed, you are betting that the logistics of the road will stay exactly as they were when you signed your lease. When the flow of goods shifts, leaving your yard silent, your physical plant remains. You cannot pick up a stone inn and move it to a busier corridor. The debt to your landlord is fixed. The maintenance on the stables is constant. And the reality of a quiet road is not a momentary setback. It is the total collapse of your economic foundation. Consider the Cotswold wool trade in the early 15th century. Northleach thrived because it sat on a principal corridor, linking the high-quality wool of the hills directly to the London merchants and the lucrative export routes. Your inn was a vital link in that chain. You were the warehouse for Italian buyers and the safe harbor for merchants carrying the wealth of the Calais staple. Then, between 1416 and 1422, engineers constructed new causeways and bridges in Abingdon. The heavy, freight-laden traffic that once funneled through your yard simply bypassed the town entirely. It moved south toward Henley, and your bustling business died in the silence of an empty road. This is the inescapable geometry of your trade. You are a fixed physical plant. You paid for the land, the stabling, the brewing vessels, and the bedding based on the expectation of a specific daily turnover. You owe rent that does not pause for a quiet month, and you owe it to an institutional landlord whose claims are as permanent as the stone walls of your taproom. When the road goes quiet, you cannot scale down. You find yourself in a brutal position, paying for the capacity of a busy inn while receiving the revenue of a village hut. Every piece of capital you committed is now anchored to a ghost route. You cannot fire your yard or sell your stables when nobody is passing through to use them. You are trapped in the high-stress, low-margin reality of an operation that only works if the world keeps moving in exactly the direction you happen to build upon. In a good year, the math hums like a well-oiled machine. You pay your 8 pounds of rent, your vats are full, and the ale flows at the legal price cap, creating a surplus that makes those initial years of labor-intensive investment seem like a stroke of genius. You are a functional node in the logistics network, turning a steady profit that allows you to reinvest in better bedding and sturdier brewing vessels. But the ledger changes its fundamental shape the moment the harvest fails. When grain turns dear, the cost of malt and stable feed spikes in unison, and the law mandates a fixed retail price for your drink. Your revenue remains static while your overhead explodes. You are no longer trading in convenience. You are hemorrhaging value into the mouths of horses. In a year of fair weather, you might clear a modest profit of 20 shillings after your obligations are settled. Rerun that exact ledger through a year of crop failure, and your fixed rent remains 8 pounds, yet your variable expenses for fuel, light, and animal upkeep balloon. The profit vanishes entirely. In a lean season, you are losing 5 shillings a week just to keep your doors unlocked and your stables manned. The gap between these two scenarios is a ruinous deficit that drains your reserves with terrifying speed, because your capital is physically locked into a structure sized for heavy transit. You cannot shrink your barn or board up half your beds. You are the owner of a fixed physical plant that only serves you when the world moves as you predicted. Once that traffic shifts, you are the primary guarantor of a failed logistical link. The weight of this debt does not pause, and it does not negotiate. That disconnect between the romantic hearth and the cold, unyielding arithmetic of the road is the true price of entry. You do not just inherit a building. You take on the systemic fragility of a location you cannot choose and a supply chain you cannot dictate. When the bridges shift or the harvests fail, your heavy investment in the stable yard and the brewhouse does not vanish. It simply stops earning. Your status in the town, your hard-won place in the manorial court, all rest on a margin razor-thin and tied to the hooves of a passing horse. History shows that the tavern keeper who thrived was not merely a host, but a manager of immense, unyielding risk. The fire stays lit only as long as you can bridge the gap between fixed statutory prices and the chaotic reality of the trade.